Serious and Unfortunate Events, Book the Fourth by Lemony Snicket. The Miserable Mill. Serious and Unfortunate Events. 4. The Miserable Mill. Serious and Unfortunate Events, Book the Fourth, The Miserable Mill, Lemony Snicket. To Beatrice. My love flew like a butterfly until death swooped like a bat. As the poet Emma Montana McElroy said, that's the end of it. Chapter 1. Sometime during your life, in fact, very soon you may find yourself reading a book, and you may notice that a book's first sentence can often tell you what sort of story your book contains. For instance, a book that begins with the sentence, "Once upon a time there was a family of cunning little chipmunks who lived in a hollow tree," will probably contain a story full of talking animals who get into all sorts of mischief. A book that began with the sentence, "Emily sat down and looked at the stack of blueberry pancakes her mother had prepared for her, but she was too nervous about Camp Timber Tops to eat a bite," will probably contain a story full of giggly girls who have a grand old time. In a book that could begin with the sentence, Gary smelled the leather of his brand new catcher's mitt and waited impatiently for his best friend Larry to come around to the corner, will probably contain a story full of sweaty boys who win some sort of trophy. And if you like mischief, a grand old time, or trophies, you will know which book to read, and you could throw the rest of them away. But this book begins with the sentence, "The bottler orphans looked at the grimy window of the train and gazed at the gloomy blackness of the finite forest, wondering if their lives would ever get any better." And you should be able to tell that story will be very different from the story of Gary or Emma or the family of cunning little chipmunks. And this is for the simple reason that the lives of Violet, Clus, and Sunny Bottler are very different from the most people's life, with the main difference being the amount of unhappiness, horror, and despair. The three children have no time to get into all sorts of mischief, because the misery follows them wherever they go. They have not had a grand old time since their parents died in a terrible fire. And the only trophy they will win would be some sort of first prize for recklessness. It is absolutely unfair, of course, that the bottlers have so many troubles, but that is the way the story goes. So now that I told you that the first sentence will be, "The bottler orphans looked out the grimy window of the train and gazed at the gloomy dark blackness of the finite forest, wondering if their lives would ever get any better." If you wish to avoid an unpleasant story, you had best to put this book down. The bottler orphans looked at the grimy window of the train and gazed at the blackness of the finite forest, wondering if their lives would ever get any better. An announcement over a crackly loudspeaker had just told them that in a few minutes they would arrive in the town of Paltryville, where their new caretaker lived. And they couldn't help wondering who in the world would want to live in such a dark and eerie countryside. Violet, who was 14 and the eldest bottler, looked at the trees of the forest, which were very tall and had practically no branches. So they looked like almost like metal pipes instead of trees. Violet was an inventor and was always designing machines and devices in her head, with her hair tied up in a ribbon to help her think. And as she gazed at the trees, she began worked on a mechanism that would allow you to climb to the top of any tree, even if they were completely bare. Klaus, who was 12, looked down at the forest floor, which was covered in brown, patchy moss. Klaus liked to read more than anything else, and he tried to remember what he had read about poultry bill and mosses and whether any of them were edible. And Sunny, who was just an infant, looked at the smoky gray sky that hung over the forest like a damp sweater. Sunny had 4 sharp teeth. Gray sky that hung over the forest like a damp was interested in her most, and she was eager to see what there was available to buy in the area. But even as Violet began planning her invention, and Klaus followed his moss research, and Sunny opened and closed her mouth as pre-biting exercise, the finite forest looked so uninspiring that they couldn't help wondering if their new home would really be pleasant. "What a lovely forest," Mr. Poe remarked, and coughed into a white handkerchief. Mr. Poe was a banker who had been in charge of managing the bottlers' affairs since the fire, and I must tell you that he was not doing a very good job. His 2 main duties were finding the orphans a good home and protecting the enormous fortune that the children's parents had left behind. And so far, each home had been a catastrophe, a word which here means another disaster involving tragedy, deception, and counterlaugh. Counterlaugh was a terrible man who wanted the bottler fortune for himself, and tried every disgusting scheme he could think of to steal it. Time after time he had come very close to succeeding, and time after time the bottler orphans had revealed his plan, and time after time he had escaped, and all Mr. Poe had ever done was cough. Now he was accompanying the children to Poultryville, and had Poultryville. And it pains to tell you that once again the counterlaugh would appear in yet another disgusting scheme, and when Mr. Poe will want to once again fail to do anything remotely helpful. "What a lovely forest," Mr. Poe said again when he was done coughing. "I think you children will have a good home here. I hope you do, anyway, because I've just received a promotion in the mortuary money management, and now the vice president in charge of coins. And from now on I will be busier than ever. If anything goes wrong with you here, I will have to send you to boarding school until I have time to find you another home. So please be on your best behavior." "Of course, Mr. Poe," Violet said, not adding that she and her siblings had always been on their best behavior, but it hadn't done them any good. "What's our new caretaker's name?" Klaus said. "You haven't told us." Mr. Poe took a piece out in his pocket and squinted it. "Name is Mr. Was, Mr. Qui. I can't pronounce it. It's very long and complicated." "Can I see?" Klaus asked. "Maybe I can figure out how to pronounce it." No, Mr. Poe said, putting the paper away. "If it's too complicated for an adult, it's much complicated for a child." "Again!" Sunny chirped. Like many infants, Sunny spoke mostly in sounds that were often difficult to translate. Sometimes he probably means something like, "But Klaus reads many complicated books. He'll tell you what to call him," Mr. Poe continued, as if Sunny had not spoken. "You'll find him at the main office of the Lucky Smalls lumber mill, which I'm told is a short walk from the train station." "Aren't you coming with us?" Violet said. "No," Mr. Poe said, and coughed again into his handkerchief. "The train only stops at Paltryville once a day. So if I go off the train and I would have to stay overnight and I miss another day at the bank. I'm just dropping here and heading right back into the city. The bottler orphans looked wearily out the window. They weren't very happy about just being dropped off in a strange place, and as if they were a pigs of being delivered instead of 3 children up alone in the world. What if Count Laugh shows up? Claus asked quietly. He swore he'd find us again. I have given Mr. Mr. Dewey, I have given your new caretaker a complete description of Count Laugh, said Mr. Poe. So by some stretch of the imagination he shows up in Paltryville. Mr. Geck will notify the authorities. But Count Olaf is always in disguise, Violet pointed out. It's often difficult to recognize him. Just about the way you can tell it's him is if you the tattoo at the eye he has on his ankle. Included the tattoo in my description, Mr. Poe said impatiently. But what about Count Olaf's assistants? Klaus asked. He usually brings at least one of them with him to help out with his treachery. I have described all of them to the owner of the mill, Mr. Poe said, holding a finger up as he counted off Olaf's terrible associates. The cook and the man, the bowman with the long nose, the 2 women with a white powder all over the face, the rather chubby one who looks like neither a man nor a woman. Your new garden is aware of all of them. And if there's something and there's any problem, remember you can always contact me or any of my associates at auxiliary money assessment. Casca, Sunny said glumly. She probably meant something like, that's not very reassuring, but nobody heard over her sounds as the train whistle as they arrived at the Paltryville station. Here we are, Mr. Poe said, and before the children knew it, they were standing in the station, watching the train pull away into the dark foot trees of the finite forest. The clattering noise of the train engine got softer and softer as the train raced out of sight, and soon the siblings were all alone indeed. Well, Violet said, picking up the small bag that contained the children's few clothes, let's find the Lucky's Mouth lumber mill. Then we can meet our new caretaker, or at least learn his name, Claus said glumly and took Sunny's head. And if you are ever planning on a vacation, you may find it useful to acquire a guidebook, which is a book listing interesting and pleasant places to visit and giving helpful hints about what to do when you arrive. Paltryville is not listed in any guidebook, and as the bottler orphans trudged down Paltryville's one street, they instantly saw why. There were a few small shops on either side of the street, but none of them had any windows. There was a post office, but instead of the flag flying from the flagpole, there was only one old shoe dangling from the top of it. And across from the post office was a high wooden wall, so that ran all the way from the end of the Lucky's Mouth lumber mill. Written on it in letters that looked rough and slimy. Alongside the sidewalk, where a row of trees might have been, there were towering stacks of old newspapers instead. In short, everything that might make a town interesting or pleasant had been made boring or unpleasant. And if Paltryville had been listed in a guidebook, the only helpful hint about what they do when you got there was leave. But the 3 silver youngsters couldn't leave, of course, and with a sigh, Violet led her younger siblings to the wooden gate. She was about to knock when Claus touched her and the children and said, "Look, I know," she said. Violet thought he was talking about the letter spelling out Lucky's Mouth lumber mill. Now that they were standing at the gate, the children could see why the letters looked rough and slimy. They were made out of wads and wads of chewed up gum, just stuck on the gate and in shapes of the letter. Other than a sign I saw once that said "Beware" in the letters made of dead monkeys. The Lucky's Mouth lumber mill sign was almost the most disgusting sign on earth, and Violet thought his brother was pointing that out. But when she turned to agree with him, she saw he wasn't looking at the sign. But when he wasn't looking at the sign, but down the far end of the street. Look, Claus said again. But Violet, but Violet had already seen what he was looking at. The two of them stood here without speaking a word, staring hard at the building that ended the Paltry Beale Swan Street. Sunny had been examining some of the teeth marks in the gum, but when her siblings fell silent, she looked up and saw it too. For a few seconds, the Baudelaire orphans just looked. It must be a coincidence, Violet said, after a long pause. Of course, Claus said nervously, a coincidence. Barney, Sunny agreed, but she didn't believe it. None of the orphans did. Now that the children had reached the mill, they could see another building at the far end of the street. Like all the other buildings in town, it had no windows, just a round door in the center. But it was the way the building was shaped and how it was painted that made the Baudelaire stare. The building was sort of an oval shape, with curved, skinny sticks sticking out of the top of it. Most of the ovals was painted a brownish color, with a big circle of white inside the oval, and a smaller circle of green inside the white circle, and some little black steps led to a little round door that was painted in black, so it looked like an even smaller circle inside the green one. The buildings had been made to look like 9. The 3 children looked at one another, and then at the building, and then at each other again, shaking their heads. Try as they might, they just couldn't believe it. It was a coincidence that the town in which they were to live had a building that looked like the two can't laugh.